You know, I got Senator Methu from Nyamakima, where he was working as a trader. Therefore, when you are doing any law on licenses, he knows this matter very well. Therefore, I do very well with his advice.
Very well, Senator Methu, proceed to inform the Senator Majority Leader.
Very well, Honorable Speaker. So sorry to the Leader of Majority, and metaphorically, I once heard from a county that I come from, because that is a county where the then very powerful Minister for Finance came from. On one of his trips, the flag of his car fell off, and it was an indication that his days as minister are almost coming to an end. I imagine that it is not the same for the for the seat of the Leader Majority, which has and without running the risk of being seen to contribute. And I wanted to inform the Leader of Majority because he is now at the point of replying, Honorable Speaker, and as a person who deals with especially small-scale business, because he deals with big businesses, Honorable Speaker, I have this very small comment to make, Honorable Speaker. And I want to...
Is it a comment?
It's
or
not a comment.
Information?
I'm informing my elder brother, the Senator for Kericho. I'm informing the elder brother for Kericho, Honorable Speaker, that first of all, this mediated version is giving birth to a law, Honorable Speaker, that will become a solution to some of the very, very pertinent issues that are serving and are hurting our people, Honorable Speaker. He was actually on that point when he was contributing, Honorable Speaker. Case on point, Honorable Speaker, just this week, and for the last about 3, 4, 5 weeks, Honorable Speaker, there has been a very big battle that is physical between traders in Nyandarua and county askaris, Honorable Speaker. Why? Because the traders are accusing the county government of Nyandarua of raising their fee, their licenses with over 100%, Honorable Speaker. If this, and because we are passing this law now to become law, Honorable Speaker, it will bring uniformity, it will bring sobriety, it will eliminate a small route that have been used by committees of finance in the county assemblies and the county executives that send these memoranda to the county assemblies, Honorable Speaker, where they get a small clique of people to just go and do small, public participation. And when you ask the traders, was this public participation conducted? No one can be able to stand up and say that this public participation has happened. Out of about 1,000 registered traders in Nyandarua and in Orkala, Honorable Speaker, less than 15 out of 1,000 were participated in the public participation of the finance bill that is now a matter that has gone all the way to the High Court in Orkala, Honorable Speaker, where orders have been issued against that for traders not to pay the new licenses, Honorable Speaker. So when we get a county board that we rely on regulations that will come even, that will have to come even from the Cabinet Secretary in the national government, Honorable Speaker, they will be able to be, the same fees that are, or the same parameters that are being used in Ramu, we can be able to borrow, because a business in Ramu will have some similarities in a business in another place, Honorable Speaker. I don't want to say anything more than that, because I was informing the Leader of Majority. I am sure the Leader of Majority, who is just about to reply, and who is a bit engaged because I know the Leader of Majority have benefited largely from my legendary wisdom and knowledge.
Senator
He can now reply.
Senator Aaron, proceed to conclude on your reply. I believe
hope you've
been informed.
I'm not sure whether I've been informed or misinformed, Mr. Speaker. But it is always good to learn, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, I beg to reply. Mr. Speaker, sir, in accordance to Standing Order number 66.3, I want to request that you defer the putting of a question until a later date. I thank you.
Pursuant to Standing Order 66.3, the putting of the question is deferred to the next sitting. we now may need to call the next order. Honorable members, we will have to rearrange the order paper so that we can progress with the business that is ready for transaction. And order number 11 is hereby deferred. Order number 13 is hereby deferred. Order number 14 is hereby deferred. Order number 15 and number 16 are both hereby deferred to the next sitting. Clerk, call now the next order.
Order number 17, the Public Finance Management Amendment Bill, Senate Bills number 40 of 2023, second reading.
This is the bill by Senator Kibwana, and at the time the House rose, Senator Tobiko had 16 minutes to conclude all her submissions. I don't seem to see the Honorable Senator Tobiko in the House, and therefore I will pass. There is a request by Senator Mandago, Senator Eddy, and Senator Orwoba. I don't know whether you desire to speak to this bill as well. Very well, then I will therefore ask Senator Kibwana, the mover, to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to appreciate my colleagues who contributed to this bill. I took note of every contribution that they made. I relate to Senator Muma's contribution on the system that Kenyans will not be defrauded by the government. So we need to put in place that system that Kenyans will not be defrauded by the government. And also allowing digitization to be left squarely on people who are on the system. Mr. Speaker, I also appreciate Senator Mungatana, because he spoke about the automated system and on criminal liabilities, that there should be no limitation for bribes on this one. I thank you, Senator Cherargei, also for your hearty contribution. It was quite a handful. Senator Tobiko also, I do appreciate her, and she commented on the capacity building and actually the necessary capacity building to cure all the county issues. And county assemblies are the first respondents of the oversight. So the IGRTC laboring function to the county government is necessary. My very able chair, Senator Eddie Okech, also had a lot to discuss about and to chip in on this one. So, Mr. Honorable Chair, since I took note of all the contributions of the PFM Amendment Act, I do hereby reply and request for the division to be deferred to a later date, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hamida. Division on the bill is hereby
yes,
deferred.
Mr. Speaker. I beg to request the. I can't read. Sorry.
Very well. Division
it's
on
loud
this
and
particular
clear.
bill.
Yes, to be deferred
Senator
for the next.
Kibwana is deferred to the next
Thank you.
sitting,
Thank you.
pursuant to
Thank you,
Standing
Mr.
Order
Speaker.
66-3. Honorable members, I will further rearrange the standing order so that the order paper, so that we do the bill, the motion by Honorable Senator Cheptumo, which has been long-standing. Clerk, call upon that particular order so that Senator Cheptumo can prosecute.
Order number 26, motion, declaration of cattle rustling and banditry as a national disaster and establishment of a special fund for victims.
Yes, before Cheptumo, before you take over, the Honorable Senator Recha Mulgor, when this motion was deferred, had a balance of 6 minutes. He is also not in the House, and I will therefore permit then the Honorable Senator Cheptumo, who is the mover, to reply.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me a chance to reply to this motion because, Mr. Speaker, it's been in our order paper for a very long time. When I got disposed, Mr. Speaker, indisposed, I was unable to finalize. Mr. Speaker, this motion received an overwhelming support from members of this House. In fact, Mr. Speaker, out of all the members who spoke to this motion, nobody opposed the motion. And all members who support this motion, Mr. Speaker, were able to justify the fact that banditry and cattle rustling, Mr. Speaker, has indeed become a serious challenge of insecurity in our country. And every member supported, Mr. Speaker, that banditry and cattle rustling should be declared a national disaster. And Mr. Speaker, same members also agreed with the establishment of a fund, a national fund, Mr. Speaker, which is to facilitate the compensation of the victims of banditry and cattle rustling, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when moving this motion, I was able to demonstrate that this menace has caused a lot of suffering. Several Kenyans in Baringo County and other counties, Mr. Speaker, I think we are talking about 7 counties: Baringo, Elgeyo Marakwet, Turkana, West Pokot, Isiolo, Marsabit, and even Laikipia, Mr. Speaker, have been displaced. They have become IDPs in their own land. Not because they don't have where to stay, but because they have been evicted by force from their land. Mr. Speaker, the socio-economic and political rights guaranteed by the Constitution have also been denied to the Kenyan people affected by this menace. Schools destroyed, hospitals destroyed, and all other social amenities, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, displacement of population. And Mr. Speaker was able to, in moving this motion, was able to justify. So mine today, Mr. Speaker, is to reply. And Mr. Speaker, I was also able to explain to the nation and this House why this menace of banditry and cattle rustling is a national disaster. And Mr. Speaker, allow me in replying to this motion now, Mr. Speaker, to say that when you look at the national policy for disaster management in Kenya, it defines disaster, Mr. Speaker, as a serious disruption of the functioning of a community or society, causing widespread human, material, economic, and environmental losses, which exceeds the ability of the affected communities to cope up using its own resources. Mr. Speaker, 3 questions therefore arise. 1, has cattle rustling caused serious disruption of the functioning of community or society? And Mr. Speaker, the answer is yes. In fact, a big yes. 2, has cattle rustling, Mr. Speaker, caused widespread human, material, and economic loss and suffering? The answer again, Mr. Speaker, is in the affirmative. It is true. It is yes. And thirdly, is the suffering caused by the cattle rustling exceeds the ability of affected communities or society to cope up using its resources? Yes, Mr. Speaker, because the affected communities have tried their best to resist, to fight, but they have not been able to, because it is unable to use their resources to cope up with using its resources. Mr. Speaker, I have therefore been able to testify, prove to the House that indeed cattle rustling, Mr. Speaker, should be declared a national disaster. Mr. Speaker, sir, 5 regimes, as I conclude, have not been able to sort out this problem. 1977, Mr. Speaker, was, as I said, was the first time that the cattle rustling started, particularly in Baringo North. When my own village called Kalabata was raided, I was in primary school that time. That time, Mr. Speaker, the head of state was Mzee Jomo Kenyatta. President Moi, Mr. Speaker, took over 1 year later. And these menaces subsisted and continued, Mr. Speaker, for his leadership of 24 years. He tried his best, but he was unable to sort out this problem. Mr. Speaker, the third regime in our country, Kibaki took over. He tried his best. He was unable to. Then Kenyatta too, that is Uhuru Kenyatta, came in. He tried his best. He was unable. And finally, now, we have William Samuel Ruto, the 50th President of the Republic. He is trying his best. He declared that he will sort out this problem. And Mr. Speaker, I am very hopeful. I'm very optimistic, Mr. Speaker, that this regime, this government of William Ruto, because of the commitment we have seen, Mr. Speaker, so far, will indeed be the government that will sort out this problem. And I want to thank the President because, Mr. Speaker, he has made this public. He has put in place certain measures I don't want to say here. And I believe, Mr. Speaker, when all the structures and efforts are implemented, we will have this problem to an end. Mr. Speaker, finally, recently we lost our CDF and 12 other KDF officers in a plane crash, Mr. Speaker. I want to say in this House, Mr. Speaker, that if cattle rustling and banditry never existed in the country, maybe today we could be having our CDF alive. Mr. Speaker, the blood of our late CDF, the blood of our soldiers who perished in the same plane crash, the blood of the police officers and the Kenyans, Mr. Speaker, who have been shed during this time, Mr. Speaker, should be able to inspire us and to make this issue a serious national disaster, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the CDF and the other staff were going to oversee the reconstruction of schools that were destroyed by the bandits. He was going to visit the officers of KDF who are dealing with this situation in North Rift. And so, Mr. Speaker, we are talking of a situation where even our CDF lost his life because of this menace. I want to appeal to the House to pass this motion, Mr. Speaker. I want to appeal to this House, Mr. Speaker, to rise to the occasion. And when the House, Mr. Speaker, passes this motion, I want to appeal to the Minister for Interior to implement, because, Mr. Speaker, it is worth doing so. And I want also to thank him for the efforts he has tried.
What is your point of order? Senator Cheptumo, please resume your seat.
Just, Mr. Speaker, I don't know, maybe understanding order 105. I know, yeah, you are finishing, but I don't know what the senior meant by saying the CDF died because of this menace. I would wish he would rephrase to say because he had visited there to fight against cattle rustling, so that there is no confusion, because you know it's a very sensitive matter. I thank you.
Very well, Mr. Senator Cheptumo.
Thank you, my learned junior, Cherargei. I think you are right. And I think I said that earlier, Mr. Speaker, that our CDF was trying to visit the schools that were destroyed by the bandits. In the process, he really lost his life with the other officers. So it is true that he died because in the process of helping the situation, and I think what Yarga is saying is very true. Mr. Speaker had actually concluded and said that when this motion is passed, Mr. Speaker, I want to appeal to the CS Interior to implement. And Mr. Speaker, I will never stop. I will pursue these resolutions of the House until we have a fund established to compensate victims of cattle rustling. And my people of Baringo County, I continue to stand with them. And as their Senator, Mr. Speaker, I will use this forum, this House, Mr. Speaker, this institution of Senate to advance our interest, to advance our security, to advance solutions for this challenge. Mr. Speaker, I beg to reply.
Honorable Senators, I determine pursuant to Standing Order 84-1 that the matter does not affect counties, and therefore I will proceed to put the question. Honorable Senators, I now put the question that aware that cattle rustling and banditry is a major menace and security threat in the South and North Rift regions and some other regions of the country, concerned that the menace has since left irreparable and negative economic, socio-economic impact, which include but are not limited to increased number of widows, widowers, orphaned children, poverty, displacement of people leading to internally displaced persons, IDPs, disruption of educational health programs and other economic activities owing to the destruction and or closure of educational, health, and other institutions. Further concern that the people living in the affected regions have been denied the enjoyment of their social, economic, and political rights as guaranteed to them under the Bill of Rights as enshrined in Chapter 4 of the Constitution of Kenya. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the national government, through the Ministry of Interior and National Administration, and in collaboration with the Council of Governors, 1, declares cattle rustling as a national disaster. 2, establish a national task force on cattle rustling / banditry to 1, investigate the causes of the rampant cattle rustling and banditry in the said region and the country at large, and 2, establishes the extent of suffering, loss, and damage the cattle rustling / banditry has occasioned to the communities in all the affected areas. 3, create a special fund for mitigating the losses suffered by and in compensating all victims of cattle rustling / banditry and settle all internally displaced persons occasioned by the menace. Honorable members, will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Honorable members, having concluded on that particular motion, we will go back to order number 18. Clerk, call out that particular order number 18.
Order number 18, the Constitution of Kenya Amendment. Number 2, Bill, Senate Bills number 52 of 2023, second reading.
The mover of this particular motion is the Honorable Senator Raphael Chimera. Proceed to move.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move the Constitution of Kenya Amendment number 2, Bill 2023, being Senate Bills number 52 of 2023, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let me begin by first appreciating and thanking the immediate former Senator for Trans Nzoia for the thought in attempting to push through this bill during the subsistence of the last term of Parliament, Mr. Speaker. Wherever he is, Mr. Speaker, I want to assure him in a very profound and special manner that his thoughts, his vision, his aspiration, and his ideology into this bill are well captured under Senator Chimera by virtue of this particular bill, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the success story of devolution cannot be underestimated, Mr. Speaker. Devolution has really tremendously transformed the progress of our society, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank those governors who are doing a very good job with devolution. I know it's not all of them, but those governors who are doing a perfect job with devolution, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this special chance and opportunity to congratulate them for a job well done, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today, as I speak before this Honorable House, Mr. Speaker, the people of Maverivireni, Kazandani, and Movumbo in Kwale County are set to enjoy, since independence, Mr. Speaker, the first tarmac road in that particular locality, Mr. Speaker, thanks to devolution. Mr. Speaker, as I speak before you here today, the people of Adu, Kamale village in Kilifi County, are enjoying proper healthcare services thanks to devolution, Mr. Speaker. As we use that yardstick to pour praise on our many governors out there, Mr. Speaker, the same yardstick, Mr. Speaker, should be employed and used by this Honorable House in demanding accountability, transparency, and oversight, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill seeks to amend Article 99, Sub-Article 2, and Article 193, Sub-Article 2 of the Constitution, as well as Section 24, Subsection 2, and Section 25, Subsection 2 of the Elections Act, merely to provide that a person who has served his full term as governor shall not be eligible to be elected as a senator or a member of the county assembly. I want to imagine there's no serving governor who would want to seek election into the office of county assembly, but I know many, many of them who are currently serving their second term. And by 2027, they will have served their full term, Mr. Speaker, are desirous of running for Senate. Mr. Speaker, it is time, as a leadership of this great nation, we speak to the reality of accountability and holding various officers in government, in governance structure, accountable. Mr. Speaker, I shudder to imagine that a governor, and permit me, Mr. Speaker, what I'm about to say might fly in the face of principles of natural justice. But, Mr. Speaker, we have a governor from Isiolo County, Mr. Speaker. This governor has gone rogue, for lack of a better word, Mr. Speaker. This same governor has refused, Mr. Speaker, to honor invitations and summons from about 2 committees that I sit. I shudder to imagine if this governor serves his full term as governor and perhaps finds it fit to seek election as a senator in this honorable house, Mr. Speaker. If he is not able to submit to the oversight process as it is as a governor, what can he do when he gets to this Senate as a senator, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we must be truly accountable to our people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, those who will come on this floor and perhaps attempt to oppose this particular amendment bill, Mr. Speaker, will tell you one thing, Mr. Speaker, and I'm thinking ahead of them, Mr. Speaker. They'll come before you waving the Constitution on your face and cite Article 38, Sub-Article 3, Mr. Speaker, and cite Article 27, Mr. Speaker, that speaks about fundamental freedoms, fundamental rights on political freedom and choices, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that is a conversation as a country we should not be prepared to have for now, Mr. Speaker. I understand. I am a lawyer by profession. I understand the Constitution very well, Mr. Speaker, and I know many opponents would think this attempt by Senator Chimera to try and bar governors from coming to Senate automatically is unconstitutional, Mr. Speaker. However, Mr. Speaker, I plead with them to read that same article, Mr. Speaker, Article 38.3, Mr. Speaker. And for the benefit of doubt, perhaps I can read it for them just to stress on what that article says, Mr. Speaker. It says that every adult citizen has the right, without unreasonable restrictions, to be, number one, registered as a voter, number two, to vote by secret ballot in any election or referendum, and lastly, Mr. Speaker, to be a candidate for public office or office within a political party of which the citizen is a member, and, if elected, to hold office. Mr. Speaker, they will use this particular article in the Constitution as a carte blanche, Mr. Speaker, to advance the argument that this bill is not fit, Mr. Speaker. However, Mr. Speaker, the literal reading of this article, Mr. Speaker, has two words: without unreasonable restrictions, Mr. Speaker. Then that therefore says and means that if you intend to push through such a bill, as I am doing now, Mr. Speaker, the only recourse you have is that that particular amendment bill must be excusable and justifiable in law, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this particular bill, Mr. Speaker, in my well-considered opinion and view, the proposed limitation that seeks to bar governors from running for Senate and our county assembly, Mr. Speaker, is reasonable and justifiable, as it is limited to the offices which directly exercise oversight of our county governments. Mr. Speaker, with all due respect to my colleague senators, I have tremendous respect to Senator from Uasin Gishu, Senator Jackson Mandago. I have a lot of respect and admiration to Senator Ali Roba. And equally, I have tremendous respect. And of course, I benefit from the very amazing wisdom from the Speaker of this House, who also served as a full-time governor, Mr. Speaker. But what I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is that even this law, if we pass it today, Mr. Speaker, will not apply retrogressively, Mr. Speaker. So those senators who are already sitting in this Senate as former governors have nothing to worry about, Mr. Speaker. But then the question, Mr. Speaker, is this: out of respect for colleagues, and allow me, in Swahili we say kutohoa, Mr. Speaker, I will attempt to coin a new word. That colleaguism we have in this House, Mr. Speaker, it is impossible. It is impossible to allow a sitting senator to come before any oversight committee of this House to answer to questions during his tenure as governor in his particular area of jurisdiction, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is a Latin saying that says, nemo judex in causa sua, that no one can be allowed to be a judge of his own cause, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Article 96, sub-Article 3, if my memory serves me right, Mr. Speaker, of this Constitution, vests a lot of power and authority in the Senate to protect our counties and to carry out oversight function, Mr. Speaker. I know there's a debate ongoing currently, silently amongst us as senators, on how and the manner in which we intend to carry out this function, the oversight function, Mr. Speaker. And I know I don't want to go much into that because it is not material to this bill, but I just want to remind my colleague senators that what we seek to do here is in the law, is in the Constitution, and our mandate is just purely to oversight people who are in charge of management of public funds, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I shudder to imagine that somebody who served as a full-term governor appears before a committee he sits as a member, a committee he chairs perhaps, and there are questions as to the misdirection, misapplication of finances under his watch, and then you expect there will be no conflict of interest from that particular individual, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have spoken to many people, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the last conversation I had was from a very senior colleague in the profession. He's actually a senior counsel. And he asked me one simple question, that Senator Chimera, why are you seeking to limit your future political choices? Mr. Speaker, without the fear of any contradiction, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that even if, God willing, I become governor of the great county of Kwale, I will serve my term and go and serve the people of Kwale and the people of Kenya in another capacity, and not as a senator, Mr. Speaker. In any case, all I'm asking, Mr. Speaker, is to give us a cooling period of about 5 years so that the Senate is able to look into audit issues raised against that particular county, have them looked into in a very impartial manner without being afraid it is a colleague senator who is supposed to answer those questions, Mr. Speaker, so that at the end of the day we end up achieving what I call real, tangible, and results-oriented oversight, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also wish to thank the Committee on Justice and Legal Affairs for their time in going through this bill. I am a member of that particular committee, Mr. Speaker. We took time and we went round counties, especially Mombasa County, in form of a public participation, Mr. Speaker, just to receive feedback from the people over this bill, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, the people of Mombasa spoke very loudly and clear. In fact, I was shocked that the proposal was that if a governor serves his full term, he has no business even seeking the position of a village elder in it, Mr. Speaker. That speaks to the need as a country to have a very honest conversation on how best do we oversight our funds, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am doing this not out of witch hunt, not out of the fear to compete fairly with our colleagues who are serving as governors, Mr. Speaker, but out of the prosperity, Mr. Speaker, and the need to ensure there is proper accountability and transparency in the manner and which these funds that we have passed here today, last week, as a house, gets to the people of Kenya, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, with those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to move, and I will call upon Senator Boni Khalwale, the bullfighter from Kakamega, to second, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Boni Khalwale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it is now 12 years since we promulgated the Constitution of Kenya 2010. And Mr. Speaker, not promulgated, but started applying it in its current form. Mr. Speaker, we have had the election 2013, Mr. Speaker, 2017, 2022, and soon we're going to have the election 2027. We would only be dogs if we have not learned any lessons during this period that we have applied. I am one of the proponents of us doing a total audit of the entire Constitution so that where it has been good, we continue, and where it has been bad, we discontinue, and during that exercise of discontinuing where it has been bad, we replace it with something better. And where, Mr. Speaker, it has been good, we make it even better. That is all that audit is supposed to do. I therefore proudly stand in my place this afternoon to strongly support the proposal by Senator Chimera. In fact, if this motion is carried, then it will be a win for the youth of this country. Through their young colleague, they'll have proved that if you send a young senator to this house, they make a difference. Number two, it's going to be a win for integrity. Senator Chimera is still looking for support up to and including being elected for the first time. But because he's cut off fabric of integrity, he's saying, I'll put my foot down so that integrity can have its place in this Republic of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, this is not a theoretical proposal. We already have a case where the current governor of Bungoma has served for 5 years as a speaker. So it can happen. Number two, the current speaker of this house is an immediate former governor. He's serving. So it is happening. Number three, Senator Mandago and Senator Ali Roba are serving. So we are not in the realm of theory. We are in the realm of reality. Are you telling me, Mr. Speaker, that while Speaker Lusaka was seated where you are, with those immense powers, there were no questions of oversight, begging from his tenure in Bungoma? Are you telling me there are no such questions emanating from the county of Mandera, county of Uasin-Gishu, and the county of Kilifi? They're there. And therefore, the only goodbye, the only hi we can tell the four distinguished leaders that I've mentioned above is that nothing personal. When this law will be applied, the principle of application will be the usual standard. You don't take laws backwards, as the mover of the motion has said, and which is the principle that governs lawmaking all over the world. Mr. Speaker, it is not possible for a report that has found a sitting speaker culpable in matters of integrity arising from his tenure in office when he was in his county to find its way on the floor of this house. We don't want to pretend. It cannot. Number two, if that senator moves on and becomes a chair of a committee, he cannot put his own neck, as they say, on the guillotine. So we are doing hygiene of making the integrity of a person who becomes speaker, who becomes a senator, to be higher than that one of the wife of Caesar, as they say in literature. I therefore want to request this House, and more importantly, the whole country, that we must make this amendment. We would like integrity to be the standard in this country. I have a personal disclaimer to make, that I have served this country faithfully for many years as a doctor of medicine, worked in Nairobi, worked in Kisii, worked in Kakamega, worked in Msambweni, where Chimera was born round about the time I was practicing medicine there. Mr. Speaker, I've served in Mombasa, and I've served as an MP, I've served as a senator twice, and I'm hoping, God willing, I'll have an opportunity to serve at yet another level. Mr. Speaker, if the country can have that kind of confidence in you, then you owe them. You owe them service, you owe them integrity. I want to make it very clear that, God willing, if I was to become the governor of any county in this country, and the great county of Kakamega in particular, that will begin my journey of exiting from politics. There's no political hygiene. Somebody climbing to the highest seat in a county, then starting to scramble back to compete with people who are now building their careers. It's tantamount to taking your child to a nursery school, kindergarten, primary school, high school, and then when the guy qualifies as to go to is ready to go to the university, we tell him, wait a minute, we want you to go back to class 8 so that you resit the exam. Mr. Speaker, the worst that could have happened is if the mover of the motion had said, they be bad completely. He's only saying they cool for 5 years to allow any mess that might have taken place in their office to be sorted out. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I strongly second this motion.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the question that the Constitution of Kenya Amendment Number 2, Bill, Senate Bills Number 52 of 2023 be now read a second time. I will call upon the senators who have made their request to contribute to this bill. I'll start with Senator Samson Cherargei.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. I know this being the last day before we go for a short working recess in county visits, I want to say this is a very interesting bill, but from the onset, Mr. Speaker, I want to oppose this bill, Mr. Speaker, on only two fronts. You know, under Article 38 on political freedoms and political rights, Mr. Speaker, I rise to oppose any way to limit unjustifiably anyone to run for any elective seat. The universal suffrage of democracy, Mr. Speaker, is very clear. If governors want to run for Senate, so be it. If senators want to run for governors, they want to run for members of National Assembly, MCAs, president, deputy president, Mr. Speaker, they can run, Mr. Speaker. Because in the upshot, if somebody today is a cabinet secretary and wants to run for presidency, and National Assembly has audit queries against him, should we prevent him or her? No, Mr. Speaker. This bill, while it is noble, it undermines the freedom of rights, Mr. Speaker, because when you look at limitation of rights under Article 24, you cannot limit rights unjustifiably. Article 38 on political rights, there must be justification reason as to why you deny a particular right. Let governors have opportunity to run for whatever seats they want. I saw the former governor of Busia, Sospita Ojamong, ran for an MP of Teso North constituency, Mr. Speaker. I know of even a former senator, the late Godliver Omondi, also ran for a member of county assembly. We should not fear political competition. Let governors run for the seats they want, including, but not limited even to presidency, Mr. Speaker, sir. I know, Mr. Speaker, in a fair competition of politics, we must ensure the tenets of democracy under Article 10, under Article 38, under Article 24, Mr. Speaker, everybody has a right to run for any seats that they wish to run for. We should not limit at any given time. And Mr. Speaker, we can never be a prescriptive nation. We should not pass laws based on prescription. Mr. Speaker, I sit as the Vice Chairperson of Senate Public Accounts Committee. Let's assume that our committees function optimally, although we have a challenge, and you are aware that in this parliament, Mr. Speaker, the joint services has more money than Senate. And in fact, I am informed, Mr. Speaker, that as we go for the working recess, committees don't have even a penny or a shilling to even visit even KICC to check on the status of KICC, or even visit the roundabout if it was after problem near Parliament. Because the joint services has single money, penny. They have a lot of money than the Senate and National Assembly combined, but you don't know what they are doing with it, Mr. Speaker. We wanted to do county visits. How can we have value if we cannot visit Bomet and look at the county projects? How can we have value if we cannot go to Nandi and see the stall projects that Governor Sang is presiding over? How can we visit Mama Lucy, Kibaki, where mothers are being detained because they have given birth to newborn babies, but they cannot pay the hospital maternity fees, Mr. Speaker? How can we visit Kisii and see Kisii County Referral Hospital? The other day, Mr. Speaker, courtesy of your office and allocation, we were able to visit Isiolo. And we were able to get the first-hand information on what money, Mr. Speaker, when we fought here, the mediation, when we sent the mediation from this, we wanted 415 billion to counties. We wanted value for that money. So how can we be allocating counties money for 15 billion? It was reduced to 41 billion, Mr. Speaker, yet we cannot have enough administrative resources to oversight the same resources and projects that. Mr. Speaker, this is sad to many committees that they will not be even to sit, even afford water in their committees, Mr. Speaker, afford logistical support. And we are not saying we should be given resources to travel outside the country. What we need is the resources and committees. And that is why I'm coming to the point. The reason Senator Chimera has proposed in this bill, Mr. Speaker, that people who are governors should not be senators is because of their own audit reports. Like, for example, the senators that they are senators who are governors, Mr. Speaker. For example, if we were to resource our committees, such that by the time an election of 2027 is done, the Public Accounts Committee has considered the audit report of 26-27. Then the governor who is serving second term, like Bungoma governor, can run for Senate and come here, Mr. Speaker. That is the point that we are trying to say, that it is our own making. We are shooting our own foot, Mr. Speaker. Because we cannot be saying the reason we don't want governors to cool off for 5 years is because of the audit queries. Yet our committees are being crippled. We are Parliament, Mr. Speaker. We appropriate the money to other arms of government. Why don't we appropriate our money to ourselves, but the joint services and PSC find it wise to keep the money at joint services as opposed to giving money to the Senate? In fact, what we should be discussing is getting financial autonomy of the Senate and National Assembly. Let them be given their own money and decide what they want to do with their money. If Senate, we can't be all hostage because some joint services somewhere sits and decide they have more money, Mr. Speaker, and they can't even fix a lift. Lift it that you wait for 30 minutes, Mr. Speaker, to 24, Mr. Speaker. The reason we are treating the symptoms, not the disease, Mr. Speaker. Let the committees function optimally so that we are not running around with bills to stop people running for because we don't want people to run for the seats. Let us fix and ensure our committees function optimally so that any governor, and the governor of Nakuru was a speaker. You can imagine if we had told the speaker, the current governor of Nakuru, not to be the senator or not to be the governor. Yet she was the speaker. She became a governor. She is now she became a governor. She was a senator here. And if she finishes 10 years, she can still come back and become the senator, Mr. Speaker. So we need to be careful on how we do the law. Mr. Speaker, if it is, in fact, I want to ask colleagues, let us make laws that you can use it on your worst enemy. Let us go and compete politically, not putting obstacles. We should not fear political competition. These seats we are elected, we are serving in trust on behalf of others. Even if you don't like somebody running against you because he's a governor for your seat, Mr. Speaker, you should prepare yourself politically, because at the end of the day, we don't want to disfranchise voters. Because voters, when they want to go and vote, they should vote based on their belief that they want to elect Mr. Speaker. Number 3, Mr. Speaker, and finally, is the other aspects, because I know audit report, somebody will say, an issue will arise in health department and that person was governor, or issue of audit, HR audit, or projects or status, Mr. Speaker. Government exists in perpetuity. Every government, both counties and national, they exist in perpetuity. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we should allow governors to exist, the counties to exist, because they exist. Mr. Speaker, the reason we pass Assumption of Office Act is in handing notes, we hand over to the new governor assets and liabilities. And that is why in county public accounts and county public investment, we invite the sitting governors, because government exists in perpetuity. And we grill and ask them questions, not based on their time in office, but even on their predecessors' offices, Mr. Speaker. But only if they are culpable. And Mr. Speaker, the cure is in the Constitution. And I hope Senator Chimera is taking notes. Under Article 2265, personal culpability can be cured. So if a governor misuses resources, like a number of them, Mr. Speaker, you invoke Article 2265. They are taken to court. They are charged. And the Constitution envisages what Senator is trying to achieve by saying if you are elected a governor and you misuse and abuse your office, you will be held personally culpable. So we cannot subject a person to principle of double jeopardy. Because if we are saying if a Governor X runs for Senate and EACC are investigating him, then we come to Parliament and again subject him to the legal hurdle of not being elected, Mr. Speaker, and there is presumption of innocence. We are subjecting that individual or those individuals to principle of double jeopardy. I know the reason they are saying is because corruption in counties. How do we cure? We make sure National Assembly appropriates more funds to EACC to fight corruption. Such that we don't need to come with a prescriptive law to prevent a governor to go and cool off as we audit the governor. We should be giving more resources to the EACC. And even if they don't work, it's a creation of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. It is a creation of Constitution. It is us to give resources to EACC to do their job. And DCI. I saw members of National Assembly the other day, out of their own selfish interest in quotes, they decided to increase their own money of CTF. From 130 million, they have added themselves 30 million. So each and every member of National Assembly through CDF will be getting 160 million. Why then do you give money to EACC, DCI, to have capacity to fight corruption? And that is what we are just saying, Mr. Speaker. This bill, while intended, and I agree with the industriousness of our in-law, because Senator Chimera is our son-in-law from Nandi, and we gave him our daughter with the necessary customary approvals, Mr. Speaker. And we are happy he's growing in stature and wisdom. But on this one, Mr. Speaker, he misfired with a lot of tremendous... I wish he would have played the Russian roulette. But on this one, he is firing blanks, Mr. Speaker. No pun intended. The point, and the young people tell him, "Nuku finish kumalo," Mr. Speaker. Because at the end of the day, let us allow Miracle Senator, who is seated behind me, Senator Karungo Adhangwa, the distinguished chairperson of roads, transport, and infrastructure, and is doing a fantastic job. And the senator with the highest number of votes in the Republic of Kenya, Senator Karungo Adhangwa. Njamba of which area? Mr. Speaker, he was an MCA. He was a CCM. People wanted to impeach him. You can imagine if this law existed, he would not have run to be a senator, a miracle senator of the great people of Kiambu. So I want to ask my brother, with all tremendous respect, can we withdraw this bill and redesign? I know the intentions, the principle, and Senator Chimera is a good friend, although among senators he's not so good friend, he's the chair of another caucus. But what we are just saying, can we negotiate so that Senate does not appear that we are fighting any section, like we are fighting governors? You know, governors, people have started misinterpreting his law, Mr. Speaker, that we are fighting governors by preventing them from running for office of an MCA or Senate, Mr. Speaker.
What's your point of order, Senator Chimera?
Mr. Speaker, I rise under Standing Order 105, Mr. Speaker. Is Senator for Nandi, Mr. Speaker, in order by referring to Senator Chimera, myself here, as being chair of a caucus in this House, Mr. Speaker? I am not aware that I'm a chair of any caucus, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chirega, could you just confirm which caucus the Honorable Senator Chimera chairs?
So, Speaker, caucus is not defined in our standing orders, but it's just a meeting of like-minded. It's the caucus of female women senators in this House. We know, Mr. Speaker, and that's why he's laughing heartedly, because he knows he is leading a battalion, and he knows the reason. I don't want to go to details. Let me conclude. You should just be listening to Solomonic wisdom as I dispense free of charge and on pro bono basis, Mr. Speaker. The final point, Mr. Speaker, that I wanted to make, let us not appear that we are fighting governors. Let us fight governors based on audit and what they are doing with the money, 401 billion that we are allocating to counties. So, Speaker, although I'm sad, can you believe the national budget, national executive budget is 4 trillion? But we are only, Mr. Speaker, giving 401 billion. That is around 10%, Mr. Speaker. It's not even 15% to counties. So let us make laws that strengthen the issue of oversight. Let us see money that goes to Bomet County as value, to Nandi, to Kisii, to Kiambu, to Lamu, to Turkana, to Tana River, Mr. Speaker, so that we see the value that we have. But this amendment to the Constitution is a threat and undermines an individual political rights, Mr. Speaker. And that is why I want to ask Senator Chimera, or this bill, if you are a minister in a national executive, and you are presiding over a ministry, and you want to run for presidency, will we say also you cannot run for presidency because you are a minister, wait for 5 years, because we are still auditing your ministry, Mr. Speaker? Can we say that? Senator Lusaka, who is the current governor, sat in your seat as the Speaker of the Senate, yet we were looking at the audit queries during his tenure, Mr. Speaker. So we must, Senator Kingi was a governor in Kilifi. We are doing these things in good faith, Mr. Speaker. I know Senator the second has said, as the Speaker, they have enormous power. I have said, in fact, there is no day Senator Kingi, Speaker of the Senate, when we are considering Kilifi County audit queries, has called us to say, I don't want this audit to be looked at. Because we are leaders and all in trust, Mr. Speaker. While I thank Senator Chimera for bringing this proposal, it is well intended, but, Mr. Speaker, as they say, Mr. Speaker, in the own words of governance and democracy, let the people decide. Vox populi. That is what Kenneth Matiba said. Those who are what the people say, let the people decide. Let us not decide for the people, Mr. Speaker. And that is why, as I end, Mr. Speaker, in the following remarks, that we must, as a country, push for more value in Kilifi County. As Peter Tosh in a reggae song, when you look outside the window, do you see anything to smile about? And even Lucky Dube, Mr. Speaker, said in one of his reggae songs, if you are building more prisons than schools, then there is a problem in that society. We should push for equitable and equality society, Mr. Speaker. We should ensure, even as relocation is happening in Mathare of 30 meters in riparian rights, Mr. Speaker, We must also not punish the Wananchi who live there, but we must punish the people who approve for Wananchi to live along the riparian rights lands within our cities, and especially in Mathare and other parts of this secret city, Mr. Speaker. With those very, very remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg to reject this proposal and wait for the amendments. Either we amend into skeleton version, not to the banning body, or we reject. With those many remarks, Mr. Speaker, I oppose and reject in total this constitutional amendment bill, but I will buy a drink after this, after rejecting, to Senator Chimera. He knows where to get me. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Gloria Orwoba.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to strongly support this motion and this bill by Senator Chimera. Mr. Speaker, not because I want to limit anyone's political career, Mr. Speaker, but I think there's one thing that we must start understanding, that every industry, every single industry that exists on this planet has got rules and regulations, Mr. Speaker, except politics. And what we are trying to do as a progressive country is to create rules and regulations so that politics can actually be a serious career, so that people can actually take politics as a career. When you grow up, you want to be a politician, Mr. Speaker. In that sense then, Mr. Speaker, I wonder why any sane legislator who is aspiring to be a governor will oppose that after 2 terms of them being a governor, or even 1 term of them being a governor, the highest seat in the county, that they would oppose, that they do not want to actually bring themselves down to the Senate, Mr. Speaker. It is because, Mr. Speaker, when you listen to the arguments that Senator Cherargei are giving, they're very premature arguments, Mr. Speaker. When you say that, they cannot imagine that Governor Susan, from being a speaker, would have been limited to this and that. Mr. Speaker, we even have term limits. We have a presidential term limit. And that has nothing to do with opposing or limiting someone's political career. It's simply streamlining the industry in politics, Mr. Speaker. I have also heard people quoting our constitution, but they are forgetting to highlight that particular phrase that says unreasonable restriction, Mr. Speaker. Is it not reasonable that we say, because of the conflict of interest, we do not want you to serve as the judge and the jury? Sincerely, Mr. Speaker. We have had, even in this term, as I sit in this Senate, we have had former governors who somehow end up in committees that are playing oversight on their former administrations, Mr. Speaker. Obviously, there is conflict of interest. With respect to the former governors who are in this house, Governor Ali Roba, who's now Senator, and Mandago, Mr. Speaker. Governor Ali Roba is the chair of the Finance Committee, Mr. Speaker. The number of oversight activities that we are doing from previous administrations in those county governments, that he has to sit and actually be a prefect of his former colleagues, Mr. Speaker, is already a conflict of interest. So, Mr. Speaker, the spirit of this bill has got nothing to do with limiting anyone's rights. The spirit of this bill has got everything to do with oversight and ensuring that those who intend to take up these offices as governors particularly understand that no, you're not going to be a governor and then come and sit in the Senate to cover up the corrupt dealings that your administration was involved in, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in that sense, I also want to highlight that I have gone through the JLAC committee report on the same, Mr. Speaker, and I have seen that the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission has strongly supported this bill, Mr. Speaker. That is an indication that even they feel the pain in terms of how do they hold these people accountable, Mr. Speaker. You have a former governor in corrupt dealings who is now a senator and enjoying the privileges of this house, Mr. Speaker. Some of those privileges being that they get to influence the spirit of the oversight committees, Mr. Speaker. How does the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission then, operate and actually independently without any coercion deal with a situation like that, Mr. Speaker. It is difficult. Sometimes you put so much expectation in these independent bodies, but when you look at the arrangement of our politics, it is impossible to deal with corruption, Mr. Speaker. This being one of the reasons, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, back to Article 38, which many people want to quote and come back and say, oh, Article 38 of our Constitution, talks about political rights, what you can and cannot do, what you must not take away from me in terms of political rights, Mr. Speaker. We are not saying that we are stopping former governors from vying. We are saying, just as we are talking about the term limits of the presidential candidates, Mr. Speaker, or the gubernatorial candidates, we are saying that we are putting a limitation that immediately after your tenure as a governor, Mr. Speaker, you have to cool off for 5 years, so that you do not have a chance or an opportunity to go to the Senate or to go to the county assembly to meddle with the affairs of your corrupt dealings to ensure that the oversight arm does not get to you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that I've heard also Cherargei say that you might say that governors are not immune to oversight after they leave the office. Yeah, Mr. Speaker. Yes, we understand they are not immune. We understand that you can actually actively investigate a former governor. You can go ahead and, through the processes of this oversight house, put the petitions, have the committees go in and look at the audits, Mr. Speaker. But what we are saying is that the presence of that particular individual during that time of the audit, during that time of the investigation, the presence of that individual in that house is obviously going to affect the outcome in one way or another, either through intimidation, influence, or whatever it is within the peer in one way or another. It is common sense that when anyone is being investigated, even in a public office, you are asked to step aside. And the reason they ask you to step aside is so that you do not meddle with the affairs of the investigation, Mr. Speaker. So because we do not want to get into a situation where we have senators sitting in the House who are former governors, who are being investigated by certain committees, we cannot legally ask them to actually step aside from the Senate because they are being interrogated. So we are trying to clean up that space to ensure that in the event that there's any misappropriation of funds or corrupt dealings from these former governors, that they do not actually participate in cleaning up their mess while in the Senate, and they do not participate in influencing the wheels of justice, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this bill serves as a stopgap measure so that we do not have conflict of interest, Mr. Speaker. Because obviously, you anticipate, Mr. Speaker, that if there's an allegation that has been thrown to a governor who's sitting in the Senate at that time, Mr. Speaker, the human outright defense mechanism will be for that governor to try and see how to defend themselves, how to go out of their way to ensure that they are found innocent, Mr. Speaker, how to even talk to the colleagues who are here in Senate, to try to explain things in their personal view. We didn't use this money because of this, to try to influence and coerce the committee members within, who at that time, Mr. Speaker, are actually their peers, Mr. Speaker. So what we are trying to do is create a stopgap measure such that, because we know you are human, because we anticipate that you are actually going to try and influence the wheels of justice, Mr. Speaker. We are actually serving you with this opportunity of ensuring that you do not commit a further crime or commit a further sin in the eyes of the Lord. So we are putting you aside on those 5 years so that you can cool off in the event that you have any oversight that needs to be done in your government, Mr. Speaker, or your former administration. Mr. Speaker, I want to point out one thing that a lot of people do not see. And in that sense, I also, let me just say that I know that the Office of the Attorney General and the Kenya Law Reforms Commission they have actually voiced their, let's say, not really supporting, but they are saying that this might conflict with the Constitution, Mr. Speaker. We are legislators. We amend laws. And Mr. Speaker, so many times whatever is in the Constitution is even declared unconstitutional by people who go to court, Mr. Speaker. So what we are doing is nothing new, Mr. Speaker. In fact, even in this spirit of creating this 5-year cool-off for Senate, Mr. Speaker, for governors, Mr. Speaker, the argument from the Attorney General's office is that if you are going to carry out this kind of amendment to governors, it should not be specific only to governors. In fact, the way I understood the feedback from the Attorney General and the Kenya Law Reforms Commission is that they're saying, why should you stop the governor from only vying in the Senate? They're saying that, in fact, you should stop the governor from vying to the upper house, the Senate, but because also the National Assembly conducts oversight that somehow, to an extent, could touch the county government, that they should also not vie in the National Assembly, Mr. Speaker. So, in fact, in my understanding of what these two agencies have given feedback, is they are almost encouraging us to say that it should not be limited that a governor who has finished their term can not only serve in the Senate, but they should also be barred from serving in the National Assembly and the County Assembly for a period of 5 years, Mr. Speaker, because all these houses serve as oversight houses. So you cannot discriminate that particular limitation to just the Senate, Mr. Speaker. And I agree, 100% I agree. And then there was a question by Senator Cherargei that why are you only targeting governors? What about the presidents or the deputy presidents? You know, should they come out of their term and be allowed to go to the National Assembly? I say absolutely not, Mr. Speaker. In fact, thank you, Senator Chimera, for bringing this thing, because this thing now, the more we talk about it, the more you realize that it should not just target the governors, Mr. Speaker. It should actually be extended to the president, to the deputy president, because in real sense, the same the basis of this bill, if it is to safeguard and act as a stopgap measure, then can you imagine a situation where you have a president or a deputy president deciding that, okay, my people from my constituency actually, they want me to go back and represent them as a constituency member of parliament, Mr. Speaker. What will that mean, Mr. Speaker, in terms of oversight? What will that mean in terms of conflict of interest in the event that that administration of that deputy president or that former president was actually engaged in misappropriation of funds to an extent that was touching on funds that were going to projects in the constituency or other county levels, Mr. Speaker? I say, let us not be discriminatory towards governors alone. This should apply because we are trying to clean up politics. It should apply to any political seat, Mr. Speaker, that actually poses a conflict of interest. And that the presidential seat is a political seat. The deputy president seat is a political seat. Do not assume that the deputy president will not go back to Madeira to vie as a member of parliament, Mr. Speaker. Because if they want, they can. As it is now, that is how our constitution is, Mr. Speaker. In that sense, if we are saying governors have to have a 5-year cool-off period, then the president should, the deputy president should, and it should not be limited to the Senate. It should be extended that they cannot vie in the Senate, and they cannot vie in the National Assembly, and they cannot go to the County Assembly to become members of County Assembly. And Mr. Speaker, dare I say, they cannot go and hold a speaker's seat, Mr. Speaker, because all these seats are political and they play oversight. So I dare say that this is just, Senator Chimera has just scratched the surface and actually opened a can of worms. And whether we want to just ignore this because some of us, I know that Senator Cherargei is actually going to vie as the governor of Nandi, Mr. Speaker. And I'm sure because he knows he's very young, Senator Cherargei is actually younger than me, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure he has foreseen that he will probably only serve 1 term in Nandi. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I am very sure that the sentiments that he brought to the floor of the House is because he knows after 5 years, he needs to go back somewhere in the politics. And that would mean that he has to either come back to the Senate or to the National Assembly. Because, Mr. Speaker, not that he's not a political heavyweight, but in Nandi, as a politician, at the age of 38 going up, 40 and above, you've expired, Mr. Speaker. Nandi is one of the counties that has the youngest legislators, the youngest. That is where everyone at 40, Mr. Speaker, they start looking at you as an old wise man who should go to the Senate. So I'm pretty sure that in Senator Cherargei's calculations, he is very well conversant that he can only serve one term in Nandi. And therefore, as a governor, and therefore I'm sure he knew that he has to oppose this thing, because if this thing passes after his one term, starting 2027, Mr. Speaker, after 5 years, Senator Cherargei has expired. And you know, that 5-year cooling period, if you are not too young, you automatically fade out of the political scene. So as he was giving his sentiments, I actually was empathizing with him, because it was more from a selfish perspective, Mr. Speaker. Having said that, I want to say that thank you, Senator Chimera, for having the balls to bring this, having the courage to bring this to the floor of the House, because, Mr. Speaker, this House is very intimidating, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank him for actually deciding that he will go forth with this, whether or not he'll be supported. And you have my support. I think this is a good idea, and I hope we see it to fruition. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Arwaba. What's your point of order, Senator Karungo?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I know Senator Oroba just used the B word. Mr. Speaker, I rise pursuant to Standing Order 110 that the debate of this important bill be adjourned till a later date, Mr. Speaker, because I believe once we have heard those who have contributed today, we have got the two sides of the coin, Mr. Speaker. And I believe by adjourning this debate, you give us an opportunity to go consult further. And remember, we are going on recess, so we are going back to our constituencies so that we ask questions and talk to our people, Mr. Speaker, so that when we come back, we'll be able to make an informed decision, and we are going to give the views of our people according to how we are going to collect it, Mr. Speaker. So I urge that the debate be adjourned until a later date. I invite Senator, my good friend, we are both Catholics, the Senator of Busia, Senator Okia Omtata, to second me.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I am more Catholic than the Pope, for the knowledge, for the information of Khalwale. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to second this motion of adjournment because the matter we are dealing with concerns an amendment to the Constitution, an extremely weighty matter that demands that the House be full, everybody be given a chance to contribute to it, and also, as my friend, the Senator of Kiambu has said, people go home and reflect. We have had the opening shots. We have had our opening shots on both sides, and we need to go and digest them. Then when we come back here, we come in with big guns so that we can do justice to the motion. I second.
Thank you, Senator Omtata. Honorable Senators, I find merit in the motion, and I now want to propose the question that the debate be now adjourned. I will allow 3 minutes for members to debate on this request in the motion. Very well. Honorable members, I now put the question that the debate on this particular bill be now adjourned. Will as many as of that opinion say aye? Aye. Will as many as of a contrary opinion say nay? The ayes have it. Now, having heard that debate adjourned to the next sitting, we will rearrange the order paper, and we will deal with order paper, order number 32. Yes. Call out order number 32, clerk.
Order number 32, motion, adjournment of the Senate.
Majority Whip, you're moving this motion?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
Proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise to move the motion for adjournment of this Senate to a date other than next week. Mr. Speaker, I move that pursuant to Standing Order number 31.3, the Senate do adjourn until Tuesday, 25th June 2024. Mr. Speaker, Standing Order number 31 says that except for the session commencing immediately after a general election, regular sessions of this Senate shall commence on the second Tuesday of February and terminate on the first Thursday of December. In subsection 3, it then gives exception and say, subject to what I've just said, the Senate shall continue to be in session and may adjourn for such a number of days as it may determine in its calendar. Mr. Speaker, our calendar is determined, and it shows states that we should go on recess and resume on 25th of June 2024. I therefore move that we adjourn and request the Senator for Draganidi, the distinguished Senator Mofire, to second this procedural motion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I stand to support and second the motion for the majority whip, considering the fact that, Honorable Speaker, we have under marathon engagement as a Senate, as a House, since January. We have transacted very critical, crucial business for this House, and it is the high time, Honorable Speaker, that members should take a rest, considering the fact that, Honorable Speaker, we have under torrential rains, which have caused havoc in quite a number of places in this country, and it is important for us, Honorable Speaker, as members of the Senate, to crisscross the county to check on those damages and maybe create some solutions for those the problems that have been caused by those torrential rains. So, Honorable Speaker, I really want to congratulate the majority whip for having brought that motion, and I tender my congratulatory message also to the entire membership of this House for having diligently committed themselves to the business of this House.
Senator Mofire, you were meant to second, then if you needed to contribute further to the debate on adjournment, you do it. So kindly.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Well guided. I second.
Honorable Senators, I now propose the question that pursuant to Standing Order 31.3, the Senate do adjourn until Tuesday, 25th June 2024. I will invite members to contribute to this motion on adjournment. I'll start with Senator Mungatana Danson.
Mr. Speaker, I want to rise to support this motion. And Mr. Speaker, like I always say, the independence of this House was earned. People imagine that we just go and we come and we go and we come. But Mr. Speaker, in the history, constitutional history of this country, Mr. Speaker, and we were there when the president had absolute power, Mr. Speaker. If something is happening in this House that the president doesn't like, he had the prerogative to dissolve this House. If it was a motion, if it was a bill, if it was anything that he didn't like, he had the prerogative of dissolution of Parliament. And members who have been elected will be sent home. until the time the president sees fit that you should come back. So, Mr. Speaker, we should not take it for granted. And we should remind those who are new that we have come a long way, that now Senate can set its own timetable, free from the crutches of the executive. So, Mr. Speaker, we shouldn't take it for granted that we as a House are totally independent and we are able now to go, set our own timetable, go consult, come back when we can continue with the business of this House. So, Mr. Speaker, as we go to our various counties, I want to just take this opportunity to say how grateful I am to the people of Tana River for having elected me and all the contributions and the wonderful people that we have met here. As we go home to consult, and I know very many of us have been going over the weekends, but now we have a longer opportunity to consult. We shall look at the issues that are facing us. Mr. Speaker, one of the major issues facing our county includes the challenge of floods, Mr. Speaker. As we speak, Mr. Speaker, we have people who are still in camps, and it has been a very difficult time, Mr. Speaker. And at some point today, I had wished to speak on a statement concerning water scarcity. Can you believe it, Mr. Speaker, that people have been flooded, pushed into camps, and there is no water in the camps? Mr. Speaker, it's a very interesting situation where the Tana Water and Sanitation Company is not doing its duties. They are not doing what they are supposed to be doing, and people continue to suffer. Mr. Speaker, as we go, we also need to think about the business we have left here. And Mr. Speaker, I really hoped for an opportunity to speak to the motion, but as we agreed, we are adjourning so that we can reflect more. And I would invite my colleagues to reflect on this issue. William Taft, the 27th president of the US, served his presidency, and then he went back to Tennessee and was elected as a senator for Tennessee. The people wanted him to serve. So let's go and think about it. Me and you may not want that senator who was a governor to come and serve here. Let's go and think, let's reflect. What about the people? Why are we only talking about ourselves here? Why should we limit the rights of the people? So let's go and digest this thing again, Mr. Speaker. Bassirou Faye, the president of Senegal, who was elected in place of Ousmane Sonko, the leader of opposition. This young man is so young, and he's going to be serving, and if he goes the way he's going, Senegal now is shining. It's actually coming to the levels of where Kenya is. And Mr. Speaker, I'm speaking with the authority as the head of delegation to the Pan-African Parliament. I know what I'm talking about. This man, he is a celebrated person, only 44 years. Mr. Speaker, let's go and think about it as we go on this spending business. Can we say a governor who finished university, got elected, served his term, should not serve in the Senate if his people want, should not serve in the National Assembly if his people want? Why wait for 5 years? Let's go and think about it, and maybe when we come back, we will be able to persuade each other. And Mr. Speaker, I am one person that will always stand for the expansion of the political space, of the freedoms we have so much struggled for. Things that we were beaten in the streets, thrown around by a restrictive regime, Mr. Speaker. Now, to cramp that space, to restrict those freedoms, I think I will invite colleagues to go and think some more. If governors want to run, let them run. Let the people decide. If MPs want to run for president, for whatever, let us be, talk about an expanded space rather than a restricted space. Mr. Speaker, so I'm just saying that as we go, we reflect on some of these issues that we have left here pending. We reflect on the pending business in this House. Mr. Speaker, with those so many remarks, I want to wish fellow colleagues, fellow senators, a happy short recess, and we be careful on the roads at this time so that we can all come back safely. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Thank you, Senator Mugatana. Honorable members, I still have a list of 3 more members who would like to speak to this motion. As you speak, as you contribute, kindly be mindful of the time because of the colleagues who are queued. Senator Karungu Thangwa.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wish also to support the motion of adjournment of the Senate for the honorable members of this honorable House to go and replenish, rest, be with their families, their constituents, and of course, we need to know that good work ethics requires good rest ethics, Mr. Speaker. And if you remember, I have a bill pending here of holidays because I believe those who work extra hard require a day to reconnect with their families. Mr. Speaker, within this period that we're going to be on recess, despite calling it a break, it's actually not a break. It's a time to engage the public, to take stock of what is happening. We go to our villages, we talk to them. We go talk to our governors because we need them to understand, Mr. Speaker, that devolution is dying from within. Because previously, we used to say the national government was killing devolution. But today, governors are killing devolution. And I can give you an example of Mombasa, Mr. Speaker. A governor giving a roadside declaration, executive orders, that you cannot sell a particular crop or a particular good in his county. They have no power to do that, Mr. Speaker. So I think we take this opportunity to go and educate governors also. Because no governor has power to give an executive order that goes against any law, that goes against legal ethos, Mr. Speaker. If the governor of Mombasa wanted to ban what is banning, that is Mogoka, he could have just told the MCAs to pass the law. But again, the MCAs or the assembly cannot also pass the law that goes against the national law. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying this is a period of engagement. Because of time, Mr. Speaker, and the Honorable Senator had contributed, can I be heard in...
What's your point of order, Senator Mugatana?
Mr. Speaker, is the senator, did I hear the senator of Kiambu suggesting that a governor cannot ban, in particular the governors from the coast cannot ban, that the governors cannot take action to tame a habit that is killing a whole generation? Mr. Speaker, did you hear him say that, or suggest that in fact, that what is existing as law cannot be changed? Mr. Speaker, are we saying is the law for man or the man for the law? Mr. Speaker, when we were fighting for independence, it was said, Mr. Speaker, that the Constitution put the white man at the top and the black man at the bottom. Mr. Speaker, are we saying
Senator
if
Mugatana,
a law...
Your point is made. Your point is made. Resume your seat so that Senator Thangwa can particularly clarify on that. Take your seat. Take your seat. Senator Thangwa. Give him the mic. Give Senator Karungu Thangwa the microphone.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the Honorable Senator misunderstood what I said. Mr. Speaker, I said no governor can give a declaration that goes against the law. I did not even comment on the goods that he's making, because next time, Mr. Speaker, you hear a governor banning coconut in his county. You hear another governor banning ugali in his county. You will hear another governor banning mabuyu and korosho in their counties. What we are trying to say, Mr. Speaker, if you're banning anything, ban it within the law. Use the law that is there, Mr. Speaker.
Senator
And I support this bill.
Thank you. Thank
this
you very
motion.
much. Honorable Senators, it is now 6:30 p.m., time to adjourn the Senate. The Senate therefore stands adjourned until Tuesday, 25th of June, 2024 at 2:30 p.m. I wish you all a restful session.
Life. At this conjuncture of circumstances is a unique opportunity, for I am grateful. My soul cherishes every moment of my stay, feeding the plethora of reminders. I congratulate you, President Dr. Ruto, on your recent successful state visit to the United States. It's a signal of God's favor, and at the same time, an increased accountability for the people of Kenya and Africa, for its diplomatic altitude. It's an inspiration for Africa that the delight is sincerely shared. I want to convey my special thanks on behalf of my family to the people and government of Kenya. 24 years ago, my wife and our 2 children were forced to flee from their country and ended up in one of the Nairobi refugee camps and stayed for 3 years while I was under politically motivated imprisonment by the Zen government for 12 years. During those darkest periods of our family, Kenya became the ray of hope to my family. My son, who was 7 years old then, always gratefully remembers now that Kenya taught him to speak Kiswahili and gave him Kenyan friends. The theme of this year's Kenya prayer breakfast, hope. And my privilege as a speaker made the meaning of hope too personal. The fact that hope is reverberating from this place also made it too Kenyan, and for that matter, too African in the prevailing circumstances. I call my life journey the pilgrimage of hope. When I decided to join my friends as a teenage student in the 1970s, with a vision of transforming the oppressive and poorest Ethiopia into a free and prosperous country, the driving force was hope. When a handful of us left our homes, abandoned our loved ones, fled to the mountains of Ethiopia, and fought in armed struggle for 15 years, to the point of losing our lives. For the cause we believed in, the overriding power was hope. During the darkest 12-year segment of my prison, life in solitary confinement, hope was my only anchor of survival. However, in the first 5 years, when I was engulfed in total hopelessness, my spirit died. I attempted to commit suicide in prison twice. I had nothing left except dreaming of death until a person called Jesus of Nazareth appeared in the middle of the night, threw his light, and gave me hope, miraculously, that I would not die. I would get out of prison, and I would live for testifying his name around the world. That is what happened later, after I got out of prison. And as he promised, he let me travel around the world, except Australia.